So right now, as we are talking, a lot of our devices are quiet. We're focused. How often does this happen during your workday? How often do you have meetings and so forth? Like, we are distracted all the time. So I think when we really start to focus and negate our time, we will then figure out how we can solve things differently, which leads to us going, I don't need to be in half the stuff in this company.
Hey guys, Damien Stevens, host of MSP Mindset, founder and CEO of Servosity. Today, I continue my mission to interview 100 of the fastest growing and most interesting MSPs on the planet. Now, would you like to have one of the fastest growing MSPs on the planet? Would you like it to run so well that you've got a CEO in there that allows you to go start other businesses? This is what Ben Debow has managed to achieve. And the secret that he lets us in on is not just understanding his unique abilities, it's understanding the unique ability of every single person on the team and making sure they're in the right place to succeed. So if you can unlock that, you can unlock what he has been able to. Don't miss out on my conversation with Ben today. So Ben, you're a very interesting guy from my perspective. Give us I know we could go deep, but I want to get right into something a little more specific, but give us a little background on, the size MSP you're running now and how long ago you started that, and then as well as your SaaS company.
Yeah. So even going back to where I started was my passion for data. I found that back in the late 90s. And it was interesting because when I mentioned data back in the day, people really didn't know what that was, sure. And if you mention data today, it's on billboards and, it feeds some of the popular technologies like AI, because without AI or without data, you do not have, great answers. And so I built a consulting company focused on data from early on, started in 2002, and then started the MSP in 2014. So I saw that organizations needed experts available to help them support their data ecosystems, right? And these are the Oracle, SQL, back in the day. Now it's Postgres, Mongo, and there's 50 other flavors of database platforms that people are now leveraging and supporting. So have grown that organization over the last, really 11 years, and we still have clients from day one. And the interesting thing that I've done differently, because I'm an athlete, I always like to try to push myself. So the DNA of the company has really been focused on not just maintaining. So I think a lot of MSPs just maintain. Mm-hmm. Maintaining's fine, right? But what I want to be able to do is go, Damien, where are you now? But where do you want to go? Yeah. And that's very important around data as well, because data is sort of a unique beast as far as how do you design an MSP around data services? Because it's not just boxes, it's a living, breathing thing that changes over time. So one of the things that we've done is say, how do we transform that client over time? And we were able to work with many clients on really evolving their enterprise data strategy, even creating their enterprise data strategy, while increasing the availability of their systems, et cetera. So built that DNA into the company and have grown that and have had a lot of success, very high customer retention rates.
So tell me help me understand what's the difference between give me an example of what you guys are doing versus what you might call an infrastructure focused MSP.
Yeah. And this one, I think that's a great question, because one of the biggest differences when you go from, I call OS and down, operating system and down for management. I have devices, I have servers, a lot of that's ticket based. Those things are not changing. There's a product spec you buy every 3 to 5 years, you upgrade. It's not as dynamic. But once you go above the OS, you have data and you have app code. Mm-hmm. You have releases maybe every day, mm-hmm. meaning that the behavior of those applications are changing. The workload is changing. And the data teams need to work with those application developers in a relationship versus a transaction and a ticket to fix or reset my password. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the biggest differences I've seen, that it's hard for organizations to go, well, we will manage app or data, but we'll just do everything as tickets. It can't be done that way easily, because you don't build that relationship with the teams that are building the apps.
So how do you guys structure it differently?
One of the things that we've done is, we have a core service. So we still try to create a definitive thing where we have SLAs around keeping that database server up and healthy. We have something called, core health, and core is, similar to the athlete. If you have a strong core, you're going to be a strong individual, right? So outside of that, we basically create these, pods that allow us to align with, supporting many companies, but within those companies, we're really focused on both talking and building bridges and rapport with the app dev teams, maybe the in-house data engineers, but also infrastructure. So when you think about the database, it's sort of the glue. All these applications are connecting to this single database, and then all these servers need to be up and running and fast and resilient so that database is available and able to process Damien's request. So it's, we leverage Slack, we leverage a lot of things that are more real-time communication that allows us to have that relationship and be timely in responsiveness.
So that mean you have a Slack channel with your clients or just internally?
With the clients as well.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I know a lot of people.
Yeah, along with the ticketing system that, from alert generation all the way through client requests, they could still send the tickets that are, I call it the request. Hey, I know what I want. Can you just provide that task or fulfill that task? Gotcha.
And so often, do you see a lot of discussion needed though? Like maybe they'll do some discussion through Slack before they just say, I know what I need. So I'm not really to log a ticket because I'm not really sure what I need yet.
I think the smart ones do. When I say smart, meaning the ones that understand what they know and what they don't know, right? Because one of the challenges I see out there in the world today, and this is with full-time data engineers and even fractional or 100% remote data service companies like ourselves, is this. There's a big challenge right now. So 20 years ago, when we began in data, meaning us and the other engineers, we own the schema, we own the code, and we basically own the data. Meaning we're trained in those areas and people respected that and they let us reject code. They asked us our advice. They told us to design the foundation for that app, which is the data model or the schema, okay? And there wasn't that much data online 20 years ago.
Right.
Roll forward 20 years. What's happened? We do not own the schema anymore. We do not own the code. We do not own the data. And we have the most data ever. So one of the challenges that we see, and this is why I sort of joked when you asked that question, was the smart individuals will leverage our team because they do see us as experts within that domain, and they'll respect that opinion and they do want that advice. A lot of people think that they could just go and design through an ORM tool to write some code, which dynamically generates code, or just have this dynamically generate the schema. Who cares about that? It's fast, it's quick, it's simple. Let's move on to the next feature request. But what they're not seeing is that's the foundation, and it's going to live probably for 10 years or longer. And that decision is going to impact them both on cost and resource footprint and supportability and all these other aspects, because I made a design decision that was not fully taken into account like the experts.
So vibe coding doesn't answer all your issues. The trends now of vibe coding with AI. Hey guys, Damien here. As I continue to interview the top MSPs in the world, one thing has become incredibly clear. It's time that we let go. Even more than that, every time I focus on my zone of genius and get out of the way and do the very few things I'm good at and delegate to others, I'm ready for that next level of growth. So if you're ready for that next level of growth, one way that I could help you is with Servosity. We co-manage your backups and disaster recovery so you can focus on what you do best, let us do the rest, and then what we do is we test the backups every single day so you never have to worry. If you'd like to learn more, click the link below. Tell me about, I suspect you serve a different client or go after them differently. Like who is that ideal client, or how do you describe them?
I love the mid-market organizations, the ones that have matured enough to have some controls in place, but not too many. So we worked with the largest of the largest around the world, and the number of controls there just to get something installed is just too onerous, right? Mm-hmm. But then there's the ones that are so small, and you've probably seen this, in your experience, the smallest ones may be the noisiest ones. They want the most, time of your on your calendar, and they demand a lot. So I think it's that mid-market client, the $1 billion and up. They have a certain amount of footprint. But the ones that also have some challenges, but also are forward thinking, the ones that want to innovate, to transform, and leverage data to drive their business. Because back in the day, fewer companies were technology companies. I like to say that most companies are technology companies today, right? And they happen to have some other business services and products. So if that's a true statement, we like to really work and partner with those companies that are innovating, moving forward. I call it balance of controls, and great team that respects whether or not other teams in their org, also other outside providers like us.
Mm-hmm. So mid-market in your world is often $1 billion company?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because like a 500 million, when you think about data footprint, so like Oracle licenses are $50,000, SQL licenses are almost $17,000. If you have 10 to 50 of those servers and you have a certain number of vCPUs, you're up to a minimum of 100 to 400 vCPUs. Divide that by 2, multiply it by 16. You're writing a couple $1 million check just for licensing, independent of hardware and all these other things. So that typically says, hey, I have to be bigger than 500, 750 million to have that footprint around data.
So I'm just going to make an educated guess and say that your MSP doesn't do the traditional infrastructure based on what you've said, nor I'm guessing you don't say, oh, we serve clients you're based in Charlotte, right? Only in Charlotte or something like that.
Yeah, we're all over the United States. So the other dynamic is we have our employees are all around the United States, from day one, from 2014 on, because we want to also hire the best that fit the team and the culture, because the culture is important. But we also, when you think about clients, we want our clients to fit our model as well, right? So there's times where clients do not work out, and we part ways as well. So
yeah, absolutely. So post-COVID, some people have adopted, right, the remote. You're obviously well ahead of that. Why did you do that? Why did you hire all over the nation?
I think since the beginning, I've been helping clients around the world. Other people on my consulting team have been helping clients around the world, and it basically, they would live other places. And I said, hey, there's no reason to be bound by an office and a chair in a single city to be able to provide that service, right? And the other one is, I really believe in, like, I just got back from a hike. Why? Because I wanted to one is start my day off right. And I love, the outdoors and nature. Yeah. So, if I lived in New York City, I'd sort of cheat and I'd go up to Central Park. I'm doing that tomorrow. But at the end of the day, it's how do we get people closest to the things that make them the happiest? Or, give them the right balance, whether it's the family, whether it's nature, whether it's the other things. And I think being able to pay very good salaries for people that do want to live we had a guy living in an RV 5 miles north of the Mexican border in Texas. He got paid. He didn't need an internet access, and he's very good at what he did. Right. So it's how do we take advantage of that, but also give the employee some perks in some ownership around, where and what they want to do.
Yeah, that's huge autonomy. So it sounds like you're quite ahead of the curve in that. Let's dig deeper around why has that shaped your culture and your hiring and your view on A players?
So it is tough because I'm not going to joke that it wasn't tough to be able to, I call it, get the right balance. And at the beginning, we'd hire the smartest people out there that we knew within our ecosystem. We said, hey, work remote, etc. And we have all the HR and all this other benefit stuff. And I thought that was the checkbox, right?
Mm-hmm.
The challenge was somebody came to me and was like, hey, Ben, do you know that we've turned over this many people? I'm like, oh, we did? And that was like an eye opener because we've always done annual retreats in these amazing places to get people out and bond and so forth, because you still need the in-person, right? So number one is you still need in-person even though you're remote.
Mm-hmm.
So now today we do annual but also regional meetups. But early on though, there's that point where we had a culture, but it wasn't as strong. We had a great team, but it wasn't as cohesive, right? I had a realization once that person told me that number, and I hired a person just to focus on the people. And that person has done an amazing job, and her name is Andrea, and she's changed and really changed the company. And, over the last many years where everybody's been trying to poach data and AI people. Mm-hmm. That's one of the hottest things. We're competing against Microsoft and Amazon, Google and Databricks and Snowflake and all these other ones. We haven't lost anybody.
That's amazing. Obviously, they can write a bigger.
And I think that alone says a certain amount right there.
No, that speaks volumes, because when you're competing against the biggest companies in the world, they can certainly outbid if that's their strategy. Correct. And pay more if that were the only thing that mattered. So, about how many folks did you have when you brought on Andrea?
Think about 35 people back in the day.
Okay.
For that. And, it's been great to see, sort of what the team has become as a cohesive team and being able to perform at different levels. So
help us understand some of the secrets. Like, what kind of difference have you seen? And like, give me some of the tactics. Like, what are either strategy or tactic around like, because I think everybody says, I want a good culture, and I want low turnover. Yeah. And then we fail to define it. We fail to at so many levels.
So I'll share some of the things. They're in no particular order, but I think the first one is defining what your core values are and letting the team. So we're in Vail, Colorado. We're in this amazing mountain town, and everybody's in this, this hotel. And by the day, the day before, we land, we go up the gondola rides to the top of the mountains, and then you have the dinner. But then we get everybody in and said, hey guys, we need to update our core values. This is the team. What do you want them to be? So the team needs to create the core values, not me. Mm-hmm. Okay. Once you define those, and they need to be true and real. A lot of people put, very great terms on there.
Yeah.
But you need to believe in those terms, and they need to be you. Okay. Number two is emphasizing. So every company meeting, we start with those core values, and we do a story about those core values. Hey, who has a great story around, give back? So it's demonstration that you're actually living the core value, mm-hmm. right? Number three is the company, and we both know this. Even with AI out there and all this other great stuff, we're still doing people to people business.
Absolutely.
Right? The people are the business. Absolutely. So you need to understand that. So we are listening to the individuals. So we do anonymous surveys that are truly anonymous, and we get some really good feedback from there. And the key thing is making sure that you are implementing some of those things, that or else people will stop giving that feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And then, over time, it's how do you create engagement? So if you and I are always talking like this virtually, it's great to see you, but how do we get some fun in here? And one of the things that also happened at Vail, they brought their spouses. We had spouses come up and go, hey, Mike, I never want you to leave Fortified. So when you get the spouses participating in some of these activities, it might be the retreat, but we also do monthly core health exercises or events. and you have kids running around the house trying to find certain things. So now you're getting excitement and people, start to participate beyond just the employee.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's creating that bond because then the people's kids and so forth, right? And as you scale, it becomes a little bit harder, but doesn't mean you can't do those events. So I think it's keep listening to the people, getting the involvement. These are some of the top things that we're doing. And we're doing the regional meetups, and then we're also doing the annual events as well, because one of our core values is unique experiences. I've had the privilege of doing a lot of unique experiences around the world. Many of us do not.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you give people unique experiences? Because at the end of the day, when we're on our deathbed, and this is my belief, you're thinking back around the things you haven't done, but you're also envisioning and enjoying the things you have done. And that's a memory.
Mm-hmm.
And if you created that memory at Fortified, and I gave you one memory, that's great.
That's huge. That's really huge.
Yeah.
So how does somebody else find an Andrea, right? What did you even go look for? Because if you had, I don't know how high turnover was, but higher than anybody would like, it sounds like. And now, you're successfully retaining people when they have the option to go to the biggest companies in the world.
So there's two parts. Andrea was somebody I've known for a long time, and then she did executive coaching and retreats and so forth, but she was a teacher. And since then, it was very interesting because teaching is one of the toughest jobs you do, whether or not it's in the enterprise space. I used to be a certified trainer for Microsoft, and you go in and teach and you learn so much. And that was teaching to corporate individuals. Teachers today have a very tough job, but they also do a great job at, the planning for the week. How do you communicate tough information? How do you distill it down? How do you test it, et cetera? So all these attributes that we usually want in individuals are in teachers. So we've hired a significant number of teachers, and then they have grown in multiples. And then Andrea had the background in executive leadership and training and so forth, with teaching background as well, like a master and a teacher. So those two dynamics, sort of helped us go, wow, this would be a great fit for us, because it was a different spin. And there's a human element there too. So some of the things you were doing, you're like, well, would you do this in corporate America? Like, well, it's working, right? So it's like, how do you get out of your comfort zone? Because, I go back down to one of the early clients we worked with was Allstate. And Allstate was a great company, still is a great company. But back when they had their big building off of northern Chicago, they'd have softball, these lunches at whatever. You go out every week with everybody. Well, slowly the softball went away, the picnics went away, all these things that we used to do went away. And one of the questions I asked today is like, how do we get those back?
Yeah.
Right. And then Andrea is bringing some of this back because, like, why did they go away? It usually has money, budget, some risk. Well, that's what people want. So how do we control our destiny. So how do we get those back for what you want?
Yeah, those are great questions. Especially, I think, as somebody with a remote culture, it's easy to miss those sort of things. It's easy to not get together and to, you want to know, but then you don't get to know, the different sides of people.
Or even when you remove something, like when you remove something from your company, a lot of times you're like, oh, this is going to save something. We really don't know the intrinsic impact that we're going to have by that one decision. It's a simple decision for you or I to have, but it might be a multiplier of impact downstream, maybe in a negative way. So we always have to be aware of our impact of the simple decisions, or maybe big decisions too.
Tell me about your focus on each person having their unique ability and recognizing that.
Everybody has unique ability to do something very well. And a lot of times I will ask people, hey, what's your unique ability? And a lot of us never think about that. Like, Damien, what's your unique ability?
Right.
Well, I'm very curious.
Yeah. Okay, great. So part of it is asking good questions and holding the space. And part of it is maybe a little bit like you'd been, which is seeing larger patterns, right? If I ask enough questions, then I'm going to step back and I listen and hold the space, and I get to learn from you. I get to learn from others, and kind of distilling the patterns together.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just one of my unique abilities.
Yeah, and it's fun when you ask that question to individuals. And number one, you see them light up. Sometimes they go, well, what is my unique ability? But then they light up and they tell it. And then it's like, how do you leverage that? And it's also knowing that what you're not good at. But as we work with individuals, we do different tests, et cetera, to be able to understand just personalities, DISC assessment, et cetera. Who is this person? And then we go into what are their unique abilities, and how do you align that? Because it's so powerful when you get a person in the right seat, focused on the right thing, aligned with their unique ability. So like I have dyslexia, and it was weird because for the longest time, I didn't know until about 6 years ago. And I've always had unique abilities to solve certain puzzles. I look at this performance data from these systems. I see things, easiest way to say it.
Yeah.
And no one else would really be able to easily see that, even after I described it to them. Like, what's wrong with me? And that was the wrong thing to say for myself.
Yeah.
What's wrong with me? If anything, now I change that to like, this is amazing. How can I help others see what I see it? And that's where I started that software company, because we're making and taking some of that unique ability, putting it in the software so that everybody can leverage that. And I don't have to explain it and teach it to everybody as well.
So what have you learned along your way with learning about dyslexia and kind of neurodivergence and that, and looking for others' unique ability?
Is eye-opening, because you don't know what you don't know. Right. And my daughter, ended up getting tested several years ago. And that's when we found out, hey, Ben, you might have it as well. And then I started thinking back, wow, my history. So I was really good at all these things. I was a straight A student, but English, I remember reading Mark Twain and like crying. I'm like, this is tough.
Yeah.
Right. And English has never been one of my great suits. And it's weird because in this last year, I wrote a book called End of Abundance in Tech. And, and I put in the front of the book a dedication to my mom. So she's always been a writer. She's a creative. It's so weird that she's a creative. She could do all these amazing things, and I couldn't write 2 paragraphs at the beginning of college. But I'm reading a book on peak performance right now, and it goes into thousands of hours of training. And now I could actually communicate and write, very well, whether it's books or, documents to organizations. Right. But finding out about dyslexia was eye-opening, and it's actually a relief because it explained things. 2 years ago, I went to the National Conference on Dyslexia in New York, and I was in the Lincoln Center, and Richard Branson was there, and astronauts and MI6, et cetera. And it's funny, there's a family sitting next to me, a mother, 2 daughters, and she's just patting her daughter on the leg as they're talking about it's your superpower. Right? So they're instilling that in their daughter now. It's a superpower. And then a lot of those organizations on stage, they try to hire people that are neurodivergent. Why? Because we think differently. If you think like everybody else, you're only going to solve those things. So that's how I'm really focused on, is how do we hire people that think differently, especially as an entrepreneur or as a business leader, because we want to solve those other problems that people haven't started to solve. Or we want to solve the same problems different ways. Maybe it's a more efficient way. And that's how I'm sort of leveraging both dyslexia within myself, but also helping others realize their superhuman abilities that they have right up in here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, right? It actually took me, I failed in hiring and did the stuff everybody else did the same stuff, copied the same job descriptions, and then finally said, this doesn't work for me, and created this elaborate hiring process that, most people, when they go through it, they comment on, like, even if they don't get selected, like they just comment on, like, this has been an amazing experience. And it took me too long to realize, what I was doing was essentially most hiring processes actually are not looking for and are kind of dissuading neurodivergent people from even applying based on the structure, based on a whole lot of other things. And so I couldn't be more passionate about that as somebody that is neurodivergent. My whole family is from, dyslexia to dysgraphia to autism, aphantasia, all sorts of things. And so I'm incredibly passionate about it. You learned with your daughter. I learned with my daughter, many of these things.
How old were you then when you found out about yourself?
I was in like in my 30s, right? I was probably mid or so 30s, and people were talking about these things. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I think personally, I had always kind of like you'd seen patterns. I would see patterns that others couldn't, but then other things that seemed easy to some people, I was like, what? Why? Why would you do this? And so, there was always this feeling of kind of being an outsider, being a little different. And, so personally, just being able to understand that why, because you use like superpower. I think that's a wonderful word because I think you do have certain superpowers, right? It doesn't mean you fly around with a cape on, but you do have significantly better abilities in certain areas. And I think the thing that I've found about myself and about my team as we continue to look for that and to nurture that is it seems like, it's like a skyscraper in New York. If it's really tall, it creates a shadow on other buildings. And so when it comes to superpower, it's wonderful if you have this gigantic superpower, but it creates a shadow onto other areas. And I think that's what we had missed before. It's like, okay, so maybe you won't be as good in this area because of your superpower over here. How do we still set you up to succeed in a way, kind of knowing that, right? Not just go, the thing about traditional schooling, I think, is you've got to be great at all the grades. You got to get an A in every.
I know.
And I don't think that's how the real world works, right? I'd take a pick the engineer or whatever it is that's 10 or 100 times better in this area, but can't spell their name correctly all day long over somebody that's just middle of the road.
Well, it goes back into building that team approach, and so when you think about like special forces and so forth, they practice where everybody could be a leader, but at the same time as everybody has a role and a skill or skills to perform. And when you think about like what you are great at, I need a lot of people to help me succeed as a whole.
Yes.
Right. And I think, and we also might need to adjust the job description. So there's the classic job descriptions that say, hey, Ben must be able to write, or Johnny must be able to write, right? He's an exceptional coder, or whatever the skill is, but they can't do these two things. If you still have that on their job description, well, then they're going to get dings every year, and then it's going to impact them. They're like, man, and then they're going to stretch and they're going to stress at the same time to be able to meet that job description, satisfy and feel satisfied personally, but also satisfy their manager. So it's like, how do we also slightly adjust the typical job description, et cetera, based upon our intent of building a team of this type of caliber, this way, of this makeup.
I love that, Ben, because job description it used to seem so like such a minor detail, like such a little detail. Because, in my early days, I was so naive. I just was like, I'll copy and paste job descriptions from other companies. And wildly, and I'm like, oh, if Microsoft's good, then that'll work. And obviously wildly different culture. So I would change the benefits to be what ours really were. But other than that, like, I made that mistake. And wildly different cultures, wildly different experiences. We weren't playing to our strengths. We weren't really, we weren't like, the funny thing is, if you want the right customers, you have to tell them your core values. You have to tell them, here's why we exist. Here's who we serve. And that's what the part I missed about like the team. Like, I think that's the job description is the distillation of that. It's like, here's why we exist. Here's why you might want to join us. And it seems like a minor detail. But like you said, you end up holding people kind of this, I would call it sometimes arbitrary standard. It's just like, well, this is what people have done before. I guess we'll just keep doing it. And the bigger thing is, I feel like something that you're really, really good at and I'm not could be like play. It could be easy for you. You know, it could take a 1 on your energy scale out of 1 to 10. That same thing could take a 10 out of my energy. You know, and if you ask me to continue to do that really well, you know, you're diminishing my kind of superpower. And then it's just as a human being, like, I don't want to be, you have to live in the real world. Like, you have to be able to maybe to communicate in some way, like written, if that's a struggle, but it's so painful. And kind of psychologically, like if once a year or whenever you're doing your performance reviews, you're saying, well, you're not meeting this kind of arbitrary job description, you know, you need to improve, instead of like, look at the amazing problems you've solved. Look at the growth you've helped our customers find, sort of things.
Well, you're sort of hitting on another subject that I'm passionate about. It's how do we communicate the impact or value we bring an org or bring or else have over time. Because like when you think about the classic resume, you know, so you have a job description. Hey, I want to apply for that. On our resume, we put the most important things that we perceive as being our wins. And a lot of times we'll say we saved some money, created some value, whatever the thing is, right? We'll have 5 things on there because, you know, you're not supposed to take up too much room. You have your skills, you have your education, and this one piece of paper is supposed to reflect who I am. It's a conversation starter.
Yeah.
But one of the things I love is when you start to talk to that person and you get them outside of a little bit of the normal, you know, interview room, and you're hanging out with that person. Because that's when I find out the unique story that Damien just told me and the unique skill that you had in communicating and talking somebody off the ledge, per se, right? I'm like, well, that's not on your resume. Yeah. That needs to be on your resume. But it's not as, you know, it might be not as correct, or, you know, you may not put as much weight on that as the save $2 million. You're like, but this relates directly to this job description. And this is exactly what I'm looking for in this person. And you just demonstrated that 4 times in 4 stories. So it's like, what's not on your resume that needs to be on your resume that really helps you stand out too.
That's right. No, I've seen that firsthand with a lot of folks on our team. And it's like, your resume does no justice. And there's these superpowers based on these stories. Yeah. Now, I don't always say go update your resume so that it's easier for other people to find you. We want you to stay here. But yeah, it's like, the other thing is, it took me too long to realize, you know, because I was later in life when I realized, you know, some of the different struggles and neurodivergence. But now it's like, there's a high number of people that don't know. They don't know if they have dyslexia or whatever it is. But also, even if they did, it was like, don't talk about that. You know, there's still a large percentage of people that are like, hide that. Even if I know I have it, you know, it's like telling them you have some communicable disease. Like, you know what I mean? You're not really going to spread it to it. It's like,
don't shake my hand.
That's right. Yeah. It's almost like that. Like, we're on one hand, we're making progress, right? With, the dyslexic, organization that you're mentioning, and Richard Branson being obviously a huge proponent of that. And right, with people now talking about Elon Musk and perhaps being on the autism spectrum. And so in one hand, we're making progress, but there's still a whole ton of people, they don't want to either know or admit it. And my point isn't like, oh man, like, I don't know. If I only had one leg, it would certainly make running more challenging. But then you've seen people that have won the Olympics with, you know, with a prosthesis. So like, do I want that to be the case? Probably not. But like, if it is, like, that could lead to some other, you know, incredible capability. And it's to me, it's a little bit like distilling down who you are. Like you were saying, your core values, like, this is really who you are. And I've also found that very few companies ask those kind of questions. They don't really want to know who you are.
They're scared to ask so much these days because there's these walls and barriers and everything else. They're not getting to know the person most of the time. I mean, the smaller the business, the more you have real conversations. I'll say it that way. Yeah. But the larger the org, it's more regimented. You have to ask everybody the same exact questions, etc. And it's very tough to find the gems in the rough and get them to feel comfortable sharing. Like even what we talk about today, what we're talking, what we're sharing on this call. How many people would be willing to share similar things in a conversation like this, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and you miss out on so much because you don't get to know that person on a personal level. You don't get to really understand their superpowers. And just as a practical or pragmatic discussion for anybody watching and listening, like I decided to do not only a time and energy audit. And I asked a couple folks on my team, said, I'll do that too. And the idea was like in the last 2 weeks, let's go through and see, okay, where did I spend my time? That's easier. And then, and once I did that, basically I put like the value, like $1 to $4 signs, so $4 signs was the most valuable. And $1 signs, the most, probably the most delegatable, but least valuable. And then, but more importantly was the energy, basically neutral or takes energy or gives energy. And, even though me and myself and 2 other individuals regularly talked about that, after doing the audit, we were blown away by how many energy draining things we were doing that we could easily delegate. The funniest part of the whole exercise, and the reason I share that is we all came back with like, this is what gives me energy. And they described what gave them energy. And I'm like, that sounds horrible. That takes my energy. And then the result of that,
then you just push everything over. You're like, here, take this.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes they were like jumping to take some of the things that I loathe doing. They were like, can I do that? That would be wonderful. And I was like, please take that. And sometimes vice versa. Right. So that I think is just part of asking some of those questions. And if you, I think it's easy to say you care and harder to show that you actually do. And be willing to kind of, the other thing around like the neurodivergent or not neurotypical is, I think that means you have to recognize this truth that I believe, which is my job isn't to fix people, right? People have and come with their own set of, there's no perfect person. And there's no like, unless you're only assessing 1 or 2 things, if you're looking at any breadth, nobody's a 10 on all of them, right? So you're great here and you're really not great here. And instead of like what we were taught in school often is get better at that thing that you're not good in, right? Maybe just delegate that to somebody and be great in this other area. And kind of, I don't know, the word's not accommodate. It's just understand and realize I don't need to fix you. I just need to put you, like you said, in your unique ability and in the right seat. And man, when you have that, the difference is amazing. So I want to get to that because
especially when you pair it with an amazing business idea. You say, hey, let's go climb this mountain, right? And then think about some of where you get your ideas for products and services or ways to engage, like giving those people the ability to contribute and expand beyond the typical too. Because I think the opposite for job description is we put so many people in a box. Mm-hmm. But I like anybody to be able to speak up, anybody to contribute to ideas, and that's where you get amazing growth. Is by letting everybody support the organization in whatever way possible. And you still have to have accountability for, jobs to be done and your core job description. But how do you tap, I call the human intelligence on your staff to be able to execute on your vision?
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, empower them to speak up, empower them to create. And just because you're, the newer person, maybe the lowest on the totem pole, you could have an amazing idea, right? You could really change the company. And so, I think it's easy to miss that. Help me connect this and kind of bring everybody else up to speed, how you've done something very few MSPs do, which is you not only have a leadership team, you have, I believe, a CEO for your MSP.
Correct. Yeah. So I put Chad, and it was interesting because I worked with Chad back in the late 90s at a software company. That's when I was at an insurance company before that. And that's where I found my passion for data. I went to this software company, and that was my last full-time job. But I met Chad and other great individuals. And as you know, we always say about business, about people, and people are, connected with people. I was going back to Cincinnati many years ago, and then I pinged Chad. I'm like, hey, Chad, let's get together at some point in time. I haven't seen you for a while. And then based upon where he was in his journey, he was exiting that company, got him on board, and then just, started to focus on building a management team, because I knew that I wanted to also do some other things, solve some other problems in the world. That's what I'm doing with software. But before I could ever execute on that vision, I had to make sure that I had the right leadership team and the right team as a whole in place to be able to continue executing on my original vision of building the best managed service provider around data in the United States. So I've built out a great team there. Chad's been doing a great job running that. And that's allowing me to both act and still participate from a chairman perspective, sort of guide and grow and coach. At the same time as now I can focus fully on the SaaS company, which is important because that is, a startup per se, going back to when you have a little baby and they're learning how to crawl and then, walk, then run. So it's growing another organization as well.
Yeah. So, tell me about, how do you build that kind of trust in leadership team and CEO to feel confident to step not fully away, but into that chairman role? Because I think that's, that often I get so tied up in identity in this original thing that I helped to create.
Correct.
Tell me about your journey. How
I'd say it's multi-level. So I joined Entrepreneurs Organization, or EO, like 9 years ago. That helped me grow in many different ways around both, operationally, identifying, balance and all these other attributes. Like what do I want to do? You mentioned energy. I spent a lot of energy on things I didn't need to focus on. I worried and stressed about things I didn't need to focus on. So once I understood that, and then also have had different business coaches that help reflect on, where I need to grow, where I'm strong, et cetera, because it's very hard for you to do the self-analysis in the mirror. Yeah. And then realistically, it's building and working with that team where they deliver time and time, because trust isn't just, granted overnight. It's earned over time. And having that team where you're working in the trenches with them, where they're delivering, where you're learning what their strengths are, and you're learning what their strengths are not. And then trying to help them either fill those strengths with other individuals or grow. And realistically, it is a transition over time, probably about 5 years of working with where you put the right people in the position. And the other thing that I do is I always, when I sign my book, it's efficiency mindset. And because I think once you change just your mindset from either scarcity or efficiency versus abundance, we solve our problems differently. Mm-hmm. So if you're always around your company, and even if you say, I don't look at my email besides a couple times a day or whatever it is, people are going to ping you, and you're on the same 8-hour clock where you're potentially available and you're solving the same problems and so forth. So I have had the privilege, and we'll go to other time zones like Europe and hang out there. And once you do that, you're 6 hours or 5 hours ahead. So a lot of times, what did I just do? I just shrank my schedule when I'm available down significantly, because I'll wake up and do a couple of emails, but then I'm out enjoying the other cultures and people. Mm-hmm. And then I come online when the US comes online, but only for about 4 hours because I love dinner.
Yeah.
And then I'd say, hey, I'm going to go eat dinner, and then I'm offline. So what I just did is to take that 8 hours or 10 hours, whatever the time zone is, and said, hey, let's shrink that to 4 or 6 hours. And let's try to to honor that. And it's not for the whole year, but it's for like a month. And what that did was really help me say, well, what's the most valuable things I need to be involved in? Right? And everything else gets pushed off. And then you also figure out that you could accomplish a significant amount when you're focused and it's quiet. So right now, as we are talking, a lot of our devices are quiet. We're focused. How often does this happen during your workday?
Right.
How often do you have meetings and so forth? Like, we are distracted all the time. So I think when we really start to focus and gate our time, we will then figure out how we can solve things differently, which leads to us going, I don't need to be in half the stuff in this company. Everybody else has it. And you keep on dwindling that down. And it's one day you're like, they don't need me.
Yeah.
Right. So I still participate sometimes in, annual meetings, et cetera, because at the end of the day, it's this. A lot of people are there because I'm associated and brought them in. I want them to know I haven't left them.
Yeah.
Because I'm still part of that team. Right. So I think that's the last thing is it's still important for me to be part of the team from a visionary perspective. So I'm still providing some ideas. Hey, think about this, do this. And by the way, I love that. That's a 10 on my energy scale as far as, what I get out of that. Mm-hmm. Right.
I love that.
So it's curating the destiny.
I love that alignment. So if you encourage others to use that, I don't know, I'll call it forcing function of taking your schedule from 10 hours to 4, to force you to realize like what's important. Is that just something you've done yourself?
I'll challenge people on a couple aspects. I say, how much time do you step away and think strategically? Mm-hmm. Like where you're literally not focused on tasks. You're not focused on the grind, but you're literally having quiet time or wherever you find your balance and you think about what is possible. If I self-reflect, et cetera, whatever it is, but you're thinking at a higher level. Number 2 is then how do you accomplish your job? So one of our other core values is results driven, right? So personally, I do not care where you are, how long it takes you to get your job done, et cetera. As long as you get your job done, it meets the client expectations or exceeds it. And if it was a 5-minute exercise and it used to take 2 hours, that's amazing. Because the challenge for us, so think about all these other technologies coming in line to make us do our jobs faster. Are you going to, if someone takes their schedule and you gave them 8 hours of tasks, okay, and they're doing that, and then they take it down to 6, does that mean you have to give them 2 more hours of tasks because they were smarter, more efficient? Because there's that thing is you're paying them X, but what's the value transfer? Right. And when do we say when? So I think that's one of the challenging things is as you ask that question, it's easy for me to go, yes, I'm going to shrink my job down, but most organizations will fill that back up.
Yes.
But what is the balance there? Because there's a value exchange here, right? So that's something that I think is still unanswered that we have to figure out over time is what is the life-work balance?
What changes have you seen? Your book is about it, but you mentioned abundance mindset, right? So
correct.
There's obviously a scarcity mindset. I think there's probably some middle ground there. Like what changes have you seen with an abundance mindset?
And I can answer that in a couple of different ways. One's I call it team, one's technical. I'm going to answer from a technical perspective just because this is something I see that's been happening in the world. If, we're all, if you think about this, you look at your closet, you look at your iPhone, we have thousands or tens of thousands of photos. We have all these clothes, et cetera. And, we are terrible at getting rid of stuff. Okay. Yeah. Number 2 is that we take that into our job. Okay. So we save every document, we save every email for the most part. Right. And then in our world, data, every company is a data hoarder, right? You think about the HGTV show where it's called Hoarders. So you go into these houses and you can't even walk around. Yeah. Organizations are like that. Whether it's audit data, compliance data, monitoring data, observability data, business data, they have data going back forever. And then, on the coding side, people code and design to get the job done. Now, all of these are all related in one aspect. Goes back down to what was the mindset do I have that when I designed it versus what is the mindset do I have to manage and maintain it? Because the developers today are coding like there's infinite resources for the most part, unless I'm designing an iPhone or at scale at Netflix or something like that, where I've changed my mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Most organizations, it's just get it done to build a feature.
Yeah.
Most organizations is let's store that data over time. And that's where we're having a tough time with how do we understand the cost of all this long term? Because all these decisions have a cost, but we never see it directly because we do not do a cost of data, cost of code, a cost of that design, right? And that's some of the problems that we're trying to solve. But it goes back down to if you have that other mindset, all these things within your job are designed and implemented differently. And if you're an organization and you do not have the right mindset for your employees, it's impacting your bottom line. Absolutely is.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't think about that, right? So that's one of those. It's not necessarily a core value. It could be, but it's the culture.
Yeah.
Right.
So, this 2025, the year of agentic AI, right? So now they're talking about something like a digital employee, right? So how do you balance the new things, but also the cost, like you said, because most people are now taking a cost that is just not a consideration. And it's funny because you have an abundance mindset, and then you have a book called The End of Abundance in Tech.
Yes.
So how do you reconcile those things?
I think there's amazing opportunities in the world from a business perspective, right? There's no endless amount of business that you or I can, transact in, right? Where I see a balance for whether it's agents, it really doesn't matter the who codes or who does the action. It's, how do I design, implement, and support both business processes and technology processes so that they are mindful of cost and resource impact and environmental impact. Because most of the stuff that we do doesn't just run for one day. Most of the decisions we make has a lasting effect over time. Mm-hmm. I know applications been running for 40 years now. 40.
It's crazy.
And you ask yourself your question is like, could this one piece of code or this process been designed 20% more efficient? And most people will always answer yes.
Mm-hmm. Well,
if you did that and you said it is 20 years ago, that's dollars. We never think about that. Yeah. So most of us never think about the cost of our decision today over time. And on the flip side, I asked you sort of indirectly, what's the impact or value of Damien? When we talk about resumes, how do we reflect that? Yeah. Most of us also answer that question only in today's terms. Mm. So if you make a decision today or many decisions over the next quarter, what's the value or impact of that decision technically over the next 5 years? Because the decisions you have aren't just this month, this week, this day. That's the value. So I think a lot of us are shortchanging the value of what and how we're communicating, but we're also not understanding the cost of what we're building and designing too.
Mm. So how do I start to change my mindset to understand that longer term value and not think in today's terms?
And I'll answer, this is the easiest way. There's certain things that I can build today that are going to return value to the company. And if I implement it option A or option B, let's say I have two different methods to design it, right? There's going to be a cost differential. And, a lot of times we think it's just option A or option B. Let's pick one because maybe I could get a good, licensing deal on this product, whatever it is. But if you step back and go, there's going to be a cost impact. There's going to be an operational impact. There's going to be environmental impact a lot of times, especially in technology. That $1 today might equal $20 5 years from now,
right?
Based upon the return of capital. Okay. Where else could I have used that dollar? So it's not just about a matter of the cost delta. It's the matter of the value of the dollar today and where else can I have invested that inside of your organization? So that's the cost of return on capital, basically, right? So a lot of times we're doing different calculations like that to do two things. One is to show you the value or what's possible. The second one is actually more important. How do we get people to make decisions today, to act on them? Most of us are you see those companies that have a lot of inaction, and they're like, oh, it's too risky. It's not important. Hey, I've already promised the clients these features or this process, whatever it is, right? They're not making a decision because of different factors, but a lot of times it's money driven. We have an opportunity over here that brings us more revenue. So how do we compete against additional revenue? Well, you could compete on the margin, right? So a lot of these things are creating efficiencies within your org. So if you're able to articulate that you could design or fix or remediate something today, and then that will translate into hard dollars, AAK margin, increase margin for your company, or for your product / impact the bottom line. Now you could have a apples to apples comparison on, is this task internal to make you a stronger person, maybe a stronger organization, or build something new for a new client? Which one's more valuable? Those are some of the things that we have to do to get people to take action today. Is talk the right language and then communicate the value over time, not just today's value, because that or else you shortchange yourself. And a lot of times you get told no.
Well said. So I just want to try to figure this out, but give me a current sense of like headcount with your MSP now, Ben. About how many folks do you have?
Yeah, I call it between like 50 and 60, I believe.
And then and tell me about your new company, your SaaS company.
So that's called Fortified, and we're a FinOps observability platform. So, we're focused on the data space because we're experts and we're known for data. So, and data is one of the most costliest technologies that you can implement as far as, within an organization, between licensing and the big servers and all the data. So we are focused on helping clients understand both the health of those database platforms, and then also the costs. And we're merging that together where we're the first people showing people the cost of their SQL statements, the cost of that data, the cost of that inefficient process. And what's happening is that's changing and opening eyes, because most of us have never seen the cost of a piece of code. And you're going, oh, I've never thought about that. And we always just call it bad code. Yeah, that's bad code. But when you put $1 in, like, I never thought that code cost $30,000 a year to run. Oh, yeah, let's make it better. So that's the fun problem that we're trying to solve today, is how do we help organizations around at least data platforms, create healthier data offerings at a lower cost of transaction.
Yeah, I had a developer one time that was great in certain parts of development and not as much in database, and something took off in AWS auto scaled, and we're at 4 times the database resources to keep up with it.
Correct.
And he goes back and he finally is like, but still we weren't scaling with it. And he's like, turns out it does make quite the difference when you index versus don't, it's very, very basic, like in database world to index or not index, but like, you basically,
especially as your system grows over time. Think about most companies today, a lot of the .com stuff really caught traction early 2000s, right? I have 25 years of data growth.
Yeah.
So a lot of those tables that is just a table. So, and just for the audience, if you don't have an index on something, you're reading every page in the phone book to go find Stevens, right? If you have an index, I'm going directly to that page in probably about 2 reads.
Yeah.
A lot less efficient, or a lot more efficient the second way, right?
Yeah. Well, the fortunate thing is, we started seeing the auto scaling and looking into it, and then he figured out why we would have in the old days gone down with that, and now we threw money at it. But like a lot of people just keep going. And the bill goes up and they go, well, we got more.
A lot of people throw money at it because they're in that abundance mindset, right? And the other, I call it a psychological problem that I've found around this. Most of us can envision a box, so if I hold up, my computer, laptop, we're like, oh, that's a laptop. You can see it. I say the word, you visualize it. If I say code to somebody, people don't have a mental image of
they
it.
see the matrix.
And if I say this code can fix this problem, they're like, well, how do you know?
Yeah.
Because it's not tangible, we think that it's more subjective to determine the output. But if you say, hey, I have the latest gen DL580 and we could upgrade to that, we interpret the latest gen as being better than the old. Therefore, I should be faster than old. Therefore, that should solve my problems or put me in a better spot. Okay. So one of the challenging parts within technology is people will take the tangible, meaning bigger servers, more memory, more storage, more CPUs, and apply that as the Band-Aid to the non-optimal design of the services or solutions versus fixing the actual problem. Because they can't visualize that code or an index. When you said index, you saw because you added an index. Now you're a believer in indexes, right?
He became a big believer after that, for sure.
Yeah. So he's like, that's thousands of % gain.
It was.
And you guys auto scaled up 4 sizes.
Yeah.
And you still couldn't perform. Why? It's incremental processor advantages where you create a brand new road across that river. People don't have to drive down 50 miles over and down again.
Yeah.
That's the equivalent of, but we never visualize that. Therefore, it's hard for us to articulate that. Therefore, fixing the real problem in code and index and data doesn't happen as frequently as me or you would like it to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think you can over-engineer, but I think that was, but the biggest thing out of that, it plays to your point, but also I know in his case, it was a lesson learned. It was like, that was one of those things you don't wait to do. Yeah. It's not a case of over-engineering.
And you could add too many indexes, by the way, too. So we've seen the flip side. So there's a balance, but try indexing before buying big, expensive servers.
Yeah.
Right. Try to fix that code. But part of what our SaaS solution does that's also different. One of the other things I speak about to organizations is optimizing the enterprise. So many times our design decision, whether it's at an infrastructure level or a code level or a data level, doesn't exist in one place. Okay. So in code, if I have just 4 environments, dev, QA, UAT, and prod, I'm running that code in 4 environments. I also have 4 copies of that data. Same on the infrastructure side. You're going to have multiple racks of all the same type. So if you have a deficiency in there, it's a multiplier. Yeah. Okay. It's also an advantage within code or what we're trying to solve because we have SaaS apps that are processing 6,000 to 10,000 clients all in a separate database. Well, that's 10,000 separate pieces of code running. That's all the same code. So what we're doing is also aggregating that up so we can see the truly most impactful, worst performing statements across the enterprise. And that's where we saved $1 million for a single line of code.
Wow.
That was bad.
Wow. That's crazy.
Right. We would never think about it, but when you start to think about those business problems differently and think about it at the enterprise level, not solving it just in your local hometown, you could impact a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. So Ben, you have one of the fastest growing MSPs. And you've managed to build an amazing team that has allowed you to not only have a leadership team, but even a CEO. And then you've had the courage and audacity and lapse of sanity to go build another startup, which is so hard. What do you attribute to this ability to build? Let's just even start with one of the fastest growing MSPs, let alone take your hand off the wheel.
I really think it's a couple fold. A long time ago, there's certain things you just want to solve or accomplish, or the things that have been undone. So I've always seen certain challenges in the world. That's why I wrote a book. That's what I want to go solve this problem. Because if I don't solve it, who will solve it?
Mm-hmm.
Other companies may solve it. right? But if they don't see exactly what I see, then it's not getting solved. Number two is I'm always trying to, grow and stay active. And it's like, I want to be able to, solve these problems, but build another organization that is also different from my old one, right? And have fun at the same time. So it's a little bit of, let's go solve this problem, but let's also see how we can do it slightly differently and have fun at the same time. And sometimes it's not as fun, but most of the times it is, because it's running a business is a tough task, right?
Absolutely. I'm going to switch gears and ask, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in all your years in business?
I think it goes back down to having the truly right people on the team. A lot of times, the toughest thing, especially when you're smaller, you have a need. Someone, and I say, Damien, I have this need. And then you're like, someone comes up to you and is like, hey, I sell this need. And you're like, that's amazing. I need that need. You're hired.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
But you don't do that big, extensive interview process.
Yeah.
And then they don't meet that need because, and then you're not, before you know, you're like 6 months down the road, like they're not solving my need.
Yeah.
And then it creates challenges. And then if you didn't vet them on the culture and core values and everything else, they're impacting the team. And then, so I think the biggest thing is hiring the right people, and the right people is a tough thing to articulate what is right, because it goes back down to the team and the people that will actually, deliver based upon what they say. And I think one attribute I love within a candidate is being modest and humble, right? Because I see a lot of people come in and talk very, very big, I call it gains and terms. Like I've climbed the Everest and I'm going to do this amazing stuff for you. And then they ask for a lot of money. I love people that are very humble. Like, hey, I'll take out that trash. I'll do this, right? And good things will come.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one attribute of the lessons learned of the people that we've hired is being modest and humble.
That's huge.
Yeah.
If there were one thing you could go back and do over or do differently, what would that be?
I would have probably said yes to being a managed service provider earlier in my career. Is weird because in 2000, I think it was 99 or 2000, we do assessments for companies around the world. And it's funny because then an MSP in Boston, they're a pretty good name then, found us and said, hey, can you be our team that does assessments before we take over the data environments? I was like, absolutely. So as I went in and started to understand what that organization did, I'm like, they were an MSP. That's when I first learned about the MSP model. I'm like, well, this is amazing. Years later, as we were supporting and scaling organizations' data platforms, someone's like, hey, can you support this 24/7? I'm like, probably not right now. And I said, no, right? And I look back, because it's a big company, it would have been an amazing contract. I should have said yes, because that would have started our journey probably 5 years earlier. And, you think about that. Something's still laying in my lap where I said yes later on. But you think about, what about if I would have had a 5-year head start?
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
What's something that you're really excited about and looking forward to, right? Given all the things that are going on in the world and your world?
I'm actually pretty excited. So when I wrote the book, I actually had to write it 3 years ago. So it took a long time. You get the typewriter out, right?
Yeah.
And some of the things that I want to help solve in the world, I call it the perfect storm is coming. Okay. the cost of money has gone up. Money used to be cheap. So when money is cheap, people don't really care as much around what they spend.
Yep.
Number two is people want more technology, not less. Number three is people are continuing to, I call it, retain and process more and more data every year, which is a multiplier on the above criteria as far as more technology, cost of technology. And realistically, if you keep the growth curve up for the pace of innovation, the pace of business growth, and the pace of data ingestion and really data growth, but you want to keep your technology budget flat or not growing at the same double-digit rate, you have to focus on optimization. So most organizations are not focused on that. They're focused on maintain and they're focused on new. So one of the things I'm really excited about, it's the perfect storm for sort of what business problems that we are trying to solve at Fortified, or bring awareness through the book and or else, different venues around how do we be more efficient and know that this design is going to live for 5 or 10 years, whatever that is. And let's change our mindset when we design and implement whatever that business process or technical architecture is.
We had a conversation backstage before, and you were saying when it comes to kind of AI and LLMs, you said something like 95% of companies aren't ready. I think that ties to the data, but help me understand that more.
So we've been supporting organizations and see a lot of the behind the scenes. It's sort of like if you were to go into a restaurant and go in, you get delivered this amazing plate. You're like, oh, this is amazing. If you were to go through those kitchen doors and go, how did they make my food? Yeah, there's some Michelin restaurants and everything's tidy and clean. But most of them are like, yeah, maybe we'll eat at home next time.
Yeah, right.
If you go behind the doors at most organizations and you go, where's your data? Is it clean? It's messy. People are still trying to figure out just what they have. What is it? Is it accurate? What does it even mean?
Mm-hmm.
So if I do not understand how it's classified, if it's clean, where it's at, who owns that, and is it available, it's very difficult for me to create an AI strategy, right? There's still going to be subsets of that data that are very clean because they're in a pretty solid data model within an app that you could easily source and feed to a model and train that model, right? But a lot of these companies are still trying to even understand what they have. And you see this even in their existing data warehousing, data lake strategies, where they have only a subset of the data that's been really understood, clean and transformed, and is being analyzed. There's an immense amount of data that's not inside of those, I call it data stores, that can be leveraged to supply amazing data to your models. But we can't answer those 4 basic questions around that data. Therefore, organizations are not really ready to take advantage of this amazing technology curve that's going on right now.
Well said. What's your biggest challenge right now?
I think it goes back down to any small to mid-sized company, right? It's sharing and telling our value prop to organizations. And there's so many organizations out there. I joked around the abundance of opportunity, right? But it goes back down to people need to know about you. They need to, how do we compete against the other great MSPs out there? And it goes back down to telling your story, showing your impact and value, right? And then helping those organizations understand that we might be a better fit culturally or from a services perspective to help them accomplish their goals. So it's really, awareness out in the marketplace around Fortified the brand. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably the biggest one that we have. Mm-hmm. And obviously relating into that, but it takes time for people to, both word to spread, but also so many different aspects and venues. Where are people hanging out online? And then how do you be seen? And how do you be heard and understood at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. Is that part of what you're hoping to accomplish with your podcast?
Yeah. So that was a fun one. One is from awareness, but also just talking to great individuals from like, Catherine Greeny, the CIO for IBM, all the way down to like, different ones from, JSOC, et cetera. And hearing all the different ways people are solving different technology or data problems around the world, but also just hearing other people's stories. I love talking to you and others because it's what have you solved before that you could share with others where you're going to help them either sidestep that challenge or grow or change that thought process or give them that other idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's more around just having great conversations with great people like you are at the same time.
Yeah. Obviously, I very much agree in that. What's the number one book you would recommend that others read?
Yeah. I love this book. It's a comfort crisis. So right now I'm sitting in my office, my temperature, I think it's probably 70, 72. I'm in this nice chair. Afterward, I'm going to go get this amazing salad at my favorite restaurant. It has salmon and blackened shrimp on it. I'm choosing to eat that because it's very comfortable. But what does that do for us? If we, and this book is about understanding that we are probably too comfortable, and how do we get outside of our comfort levels to challenge ourselves? And most of us, even myself, we think we could only accomplish X, but we could accomplish Y. But we never put ourselves in that extreme, right? So I'm going to be doing a Misogi, and a Misogi is something you learn about in that book. It's basically an event that you can't die and you only succeed about 50% of the time. It's something that you set for yourself as a goal and you go, accomplish this amazing feat, or maybe you fail. But if you succeed, you're like, I didn't think I could ever do that. And you did it. And it pushes your boundaries. So the comfort crisis really helps you understand that you could do a lot more than you think. We are very comfortable. And it really helps you. It's similar to his second book, Scarcity Crisis. It helps you understand how are we built and how did we grow up over the last thousands of years? And then how do you apply this to your problems today or your challenges today in your life today?
That sounds like a great challenge. Well, I'd love to hear your Misogi, whether you have it now or come and share it with me when you have that. That would be wonderful.
Yeah. So this is it's. I'll share with this. So this weekend I'm actually, or 2 weekends I'm hiking for the cystic fibrosis extreme hike. So it's a 30.1 mile. This year it's 31 miles. It's a hike. Started about, I think, 14 years ago in Charlotte with these two guys. I do that every year for the most part. And we raise money for a great cause. So for my Misogi, I was like, well, what do I want to do that is going to challenge? So 31 miles on the AT or in the mountains, pretty tough. I'm like, what is a limit that I think it would be very tough? So I'm going to do 50 miles in a single day. It might be 60, but 50 miles is the number I'm setting.
Wow.
In the mountains at elevation in a single day, self-supported. I believe I could do it, but can I do it? And once I do it, what will I know about myself? Well, I'll have learned about myself. So that's hopefully going to be done in the fall, and I'll let you know how that goes.
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to hear. I'd love to chat again. Share where people can find your book, your podcast, and connect with you online.
So Amazon.com, End of Abundance in Tech. It's that's probably the easiest one. It's also on Audible and Kindle. Has all the different media. There's BenDebow.com, which has sort of like the superset of all the ways to connect in the media. LinkedIn is one of the areas I'm on. I'm not on much social just because of if anything, I'm trying to become less technology dependent versus more, LinkedIn is a great way. And my bendebow.com also has direct ways to contact me as well. If you do read the book, the call to action for you guys is Goodreads, Amazon reviews. Those are very important to be able to have others be able to find that and, start to change their mindset.
I love that. Thank you for allowing us to connect. Make sure to take Ben up on that offer to connect with him. I've gotten so much out of this, Ben. And from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for being on MSP Mindset and just showing up with this level of energy and intensity.
Yeah, Damien, I loved it. I love that you're Greenville and growing some great business as well. And definitely thanks for taking the time to chat with me.